The painter Gino Parin lived in the port city of Trieste before and during the rise of Italian fascism. Born Jewish, he converted to Catholicism. When Nazi Germany occupied Trieste, Parin was arrested and deported to a concentration camp in Germany, where he died. In this series, we encounter a life full of nuance and complications during the upheavals of the early 20th century. Episode 4: Citizenship.
Gino Parin was born and lived in Trieste for much of his life. He was an Italian, right?
At first appearance, it does seem that way. But at his birth in 1876, Trieste was a part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, also known as the Habsburg Empire.
And?
This means that Gino and his Jewish family were Austrian nationals. They spoke German. Gino even attended a German-speaking high school in Trieste.
As a boy, Gino went by the German name Fritz,
But he was born Federico.
and later changed his name to Gino.
Federico, Fritz, Gino? Truly a cosmopolitan.
That's the perfect way to describe this painter. And, like so much of his life, unpacking his citizenship and nationality requires some digging into archives.
It turns out that just before the turn of the 20th century, Parin applied to become a citizen of Switzerland. He was 21 at the time, and for the past several years his official residence had been the Swiss city of Lugano.
We don't know exactly why Parin applied for Swiss citizenship. It was probably linked to his family's business in Switzerland.
To get clarification, we reached out to the Swiss embassy. They confirmed that during the late 19th century, it was possible to be naturalized as a Swiss citizen as long as you renounced your original citizenship.
And that is exactly what Parin did. His deed of renunciation records that in 1898 he gave up any bonds of citizenship or links that he previously had with the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Now it makes sense why Parin is listed as a Swiss citizen on his German 1898 marriage certificate. He had married that year Ella Aller, an American Catholic, in Munich. Both studied art there.
She was American?
Yes, and not only that, she was 7 months pregnant at her marriage.
1898 was clearly a big year. Parin obtains his Swiss citizenship, gets married, and he'll be a parent soon.
And don't forget, this was also the year that Parin converts to Catholicism.
What?
Gino and Ella divorced in 1906, but he remained a Catholic for the rest of his life.
In the years before World War I, Parin continues to live in Munich and has his work exhibited in Vienna, Italy, and Trieste. He starts using the name F. Gino Parin to sign his work and apply for shows.
But shortly before the war breaks out, he decides to return to Trieste, the city of his birth.
And that's where Parin was living and working when, after World War I, Italy annexed Trieste in 1920 with the Treaty of Rapallo.
This opened the possibility for Parin to become an Italian citizen. The existing documents are not quite clear about this, but letters exchanged between Trieste's police commissioner and prefect in the late 1930s mention that the artist was an Italian national.
So Parin becomes an Italian after World War I?
Yes, that is what our documents suggest.
Parin often visited his extended family in Switzerland. He most likely remained a Swiss national at the same time.
After World War I, many non-Italians in Trieste changed their last names. In 1923, Parin submitted a request of his own.
Was this a coincidence? Or was it Parin's response to the rise of nationalism that campaigned against ethnic minorities? We know that people requested name changes to conform to Italy's fascist policy of Italianization.
So, Federico Pollock officially becomes Federico Gino Parin in 1923.
Let's fast forward 15 years to the fall of 1938.
Well, why 1938?
Because this is when Mussolini's fascist regime undertakes a Jewish census and declares all foreign Jews barred from citizenship rights.
Mussolini's Manifesto of Race had already been published in July. But after the census in August, Italian Jews lost their jobs, status, and other rights. They were not allowed to attend school, own a business, or, in the case of an artist like Parin, exhibit publicly.
Trieste had the third largest Jewish population in Italy, and many had actually supported the rise of fascism. But when their rights were curtailed, they started leaving the city.
Parin, now in his early 60s, stayed. He must have felt somewhat safe in fascist Trieste because his Swiss passport was valid until 1942.
What Gino did not know was this. On March 13, 1939, the police commissioner in Trieste wrote to the office of the prefect to see if Parin could still use his Italian surname, which had been approved in 1923. Now that his Italian citizenship had been revoked, should he be called Pollock again? The letter also referred to his Jewish parents and described him as of the Jewish race and Catholic religion.
Parin also did not know that later that month, the prefect of Trieste sent a letter to the Italian interior minister. It stated that Gino was no longer an Italian citizen, but no further actions were going to be taken against him.
For years, Parin traveled back and forth between Switzerland and Trieste. In 1943, he officially immigrated to Switzerland, but actually remained in Trieste.
And that is where he was on April 15, 1944, when the German secret police, the Gestapo, finally arrested him. They detained him in the Coroneo prison in Trieste.
A friend of Parin, Emile Bonzanigo, immediately tried to rescue him. Bonzanigo, the only remaining Swiss consul in Trieste, went to the Gestapo headquarters to get him released. He negotiated with SS Obersturmbannführer Ernst Weinmann, the lieutenant colonel of the feared German security branch that enforced Nazi racial policies in the annexed Italian territories.
Bonzanigo reminded the SS officer that Swiss Jews could not be arrested or have their property seized.
Weinmann claimed to know nothing about Parin's incarceration but promised to look into the matter.
Bonzanigo reached out to other Germans and repeated what he told Weinmann. Swiss citizens are exempt from arrest and property seizures.
More letters, telegrams, and memos were exchanged between the head of the Swiss Foreign Department, the German officials in the Foreign Office, the police, and the security services.
Bonzanigo visited Parin in the Coroneo prison on May 6th to tell him he would be released soon.
On May 9th, a letter arrived at Trieste's Swiss consulate. It said that Parin had been taken to the Swiss border at Chiasso and his confiscated property returned.
The customs office in Chiasso awaited in vain for the arrival of the train. By May 15th, it was clear to the Swiss that something had gone wrong.
On May 26th, Gino's brother, Vittorio, asked officials in the Swiss capital of Bern for clarification.
Where is Gino?
Several days later, these officials were informed that Parin had not been sent to Chiasso, as promised, but to the Fossoli di Carpi prison and transit camp run jointly by the Germans and the Italians in the province of Modena.
So this is why Parin never turned up at the Swiss border.
Correct. By the time the Swiss received this information, Parin was already on transport to the concentration camp of Bergen-Belsen.
To their credit, the Swiss government pulled out all the stops to secure Parin's release. On June 2nd, Bonzanigo learned from the SS officer Weinmann that Parin's release from Fossoli had been granted, though Parin no longer was at Fossoli.
Perhaps it was a slip-up in the Nazi bureaucracy. More likely, Parin's arrest was purposeful, to use him as a hostage.
The Swiss general consul sent additional appeals to Italy's highest Gestapo leader, Wilhelm Harster. By mid-July, Harster finally granted the release of some Swiss nationals from Bergen-Belsen. But by then, Parin was already dead.
Parin's Swiss citizenship should have protected him, but in the end, it was used against him. Parin became a pawn of the Third Reich and, ultimately, a victim of the Holocaust.